Coming up here on Patriots Today by Chat Sports, I have two things I want to talk to you guys about. Number one, is Jerod Mayo's job safe? Well, Robert Kraft and Albert Breer seem that it is. Well, in the back half of the show, I can't say the rest for all the personnel for the Patriots right now, so maybe DeMarcus Covington will not be the defensive coordinator for next season, so who should be? We're going to talk about some defensive coordinator candidates on the back half of the show, but before we hop into anything, I just have a question for you guys. Should New England fire DeMarcus Covington? I'm definitely not a fan of doing it in the middle of the season. If anything, I think that the Patriots already had a playoff contention, should maybe just ride with it for the rest of the year. But for next year, I think I'm going to go with yes. But we're going to break that down here in just a moment. So if you guys want to stick around for that, go on ahead, hit that sub button, and let's get into it. The latest report coming out from Albert Breer is that Jerod Mayo is seemingly on solid ground to be the head coach in 2025. This doesn't really come as a surprise. I had kind of assumed this, considering that Jerod Mayo really hasn't had the best season, but he also was expected to not have the best season. So ultimately, he's kind of right there in terms of my expectations, but we do know that he has had some questionable things happen while he's been head coach. So I want to break that down here on Patriots Today by Chat Sports. Thank you guys so much for tuning in here and watching this channel with me every single day. So let's go on ahead and just jump into what Albert Breer had to say based on whether or not Jerod Mayo will be back next year. He said, I just get the feeling that they know where they are and that this is going to take a couple of off seasons to get through. There wasn't anybody blind to the fact that the roster was not in a good spot coming out of 2023, and it's not like they had a bunch of young talent that they could really start to build a roster off of. And that's kind of the number one thing that a lot of Patriots fans have started to realize here is that he wasn't handed the best team. And when you look at some of the things that Jerod Mayo has dealt with just being the head coach, I mean, obviously a lot of head coaches deal with adversity here, but this has been an interesting season to say the least. Chuck Okorafor, I mean, he just up and quit after the first game. They had invested in him all offseason, and then he had to create a completely different plan at left tackle because Okorafor was just like, you know what, I don't think football's really for me anymore. And then Jabril Peppers, a captain, a three-time captain for New England, was arrested. Now he went from going from playing 4 straight games to not playing until week 13. That's a lot of adjustment right there, especially not having him in the locker room. He was handed no top wide receiver. So now he's tried to rearrange and move the offense without having a Justin Jefferson or a Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then, of course, of that, numerous injuries, which every single NFL team does have to deal with every single year, but it doesn't help a rookie coach. Let me tell you, he's trying to figure out who his team is, what they need, and if everybody keeps getting injured, it's kind of hard to figure that out. But then Albert Breer did say something saying, there is a lot of aspects of the organization that I do think will be under evaluation over the next 6 weeks. That said, I do think the Crafts have respect for the spot that Jerod Mayo has been in and is coming into this season. So now you're starting to look at it like, okay, he's going to possibly be under evaluation over the next 4 weeks, which must mean that other people are going to be under evaluation over the next 4 weeks. So I will point out 4 things that I think Jerod Mayo has completely put on his plate by himself. He called the entire team soft. Okay, you kind of can't do that. You're the leader. You're supposed to be setting an example. I know you're frustrated, but he called him soft after the Jaguars lost. And now I will give Mayo a little bit of credit. He could have said a lot worse about that team. And he said soft. So that's fair. He has the 4th worst record in the NFL. Once again, what were you expecting this year? My standards raised a little bit after they beat the Bengals in week 1, but after that, it kind of went back to normal. But then most recently, some coaching decisions that I've seen that have kind of made me think, okay, weird. He opted to take a 68-yard field goal in 30-degree weather in Foxborough rather than allowing your rookie quarterback with a cannon of an arm to launch it downfield for a Hail Mary, and he ended up losing the Colts 25-24. I know, I'm not a head coach, but that seemed weird to me. I would have just, chucked it down there. I mean, the wind chill in Foxborough really isn't anybody's friend, especially not Joey Sly's. So that was a little bit weird. But then I noticed that the team just overall lacks discipline for penalties, which I still cannot stand. So now that we're seeing what Jerod Mayo can do in his own terms, it's still not great. But once again, he is still learning. He is still a rookie. And overall, this does seem like things that could be fixed moving forward in the rest of the season. Well, Albert Breer had one more thing to say here on Jerod Mayo, saying, I still think Jerod Mayo is on really solid ground going into 2025. The question is, how different will it look around him? And I think there are fair questions to ask when it comes to that. And obviously, we've had these questions before in terms of whether or not we think that the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator will be coming back. And in my opinion, I do not think that Alex Van Pelt and DeMarcus Covington seem safe. If I was them, I'd be updating that resume because you're not going to fire the head coach, in my opinion, especially not one that Robert Kraft handpicked 5 years ago. Do you know what Robert Kraft would have to do if he fired Jerod Mayo after this year? He'd have to admit that he was wrong about the man that he hired basically 5 years ago. Robert Kraft's not going to do that. So what can Kraft do? You can kick out the OC. You can kick out the DC. You can start to put more experienced people around your inexperienced head coach instead of just plugging in a very new OC, a very new DC, and a very new head coach. You kind of set him up for failure there. But I do think AVP and DeMarcus Covington will be gone heading into next season. That's just my opinion, though. But I do want to tell you guys real quick about our sponsor, and then I'm going to hop in to some defensive coordinator candidates, in my opinion. But let me tell you real quick about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the #1 way to get tickets to any sporting event, concert, comedy show, maybe even the theater. And I know the holidays are starting to come around, and one thing that I've really started to notice from my parents whenever I ask them, hey, what do you want for the holidays? They always say, just quality time. I just want to spend time with you guys, and I think getting them tickets to a game that you all love, a concert from an artist that you all love, I think that's the best gift you can give them, in my opinion. So if you guys want to make sure you're saving some money this holiday season and all year round, well, Game Time allows you to do just that. You're going to get the lowest price guarantee. You're also going to get a 180 panoramic view from your seat before you buy those tickets to make sure you know exactly where you, mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa want to sit. And not to mention, you're going to get all-in pricing. I think that's probably my favorite part of Game Time is that you can see all that you're going to pay upfront, no surprise fees. And then with Game Time picks, they actually filter out all the fluff to make sure getting tickets to your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time picks sorts out all of the deals to make sure you're getting the best seats at the best prices, guaranteed. So if you guys want to go ahead and get started, just download the Game Time app. Use promo code CHATSPORTS. This will get you $20 off your first time buying tickets while terms apply. Again, use Game Time, download the app, create an account, use promo code CHATSPORTS. That'll get you $20 off your first time buying tickets while terms do apply. Because what time is it? Well, it's game time. Speaking of Game Time, let's talk about it. Let's talk about Sunday's Game Time loss against the Colts. I want to talk about the last drive for the Colts offense because it highly reflects our defense. Indianapolis had a 19-play drive for over 5 minutes to score the game-winning touchdown and the game-sealing 2-point conversion. Not to mention Anthony Richardson just walked on into the end zone to make that 2-point conversion successful. Our defense is looking horrendous, which is something we have not said in the last couple of years. They were normally the only bright spot that we had in our season because our offense had so many struggles that you're like, you know what? At least our defense is top 10. Not anymore. This year, we give up an average of 347.5 yards a game. That's 22nd in the NFL. Our run defense isn't much better, 123 yards per game. That's 18th in the NFL. And our pass defense, which I know, Christian Gonzalez is only one man out there. They're giving up an average of 224.4 yards, which is second in the NFL. So no, gone are the days of the Patriots being a top 10 team in the NFL when it comes to defense. And that's what really starts to aggravate me, is that we have seen them be successful in the past with some of the same players. So why do they suck now? Maybe it's DeMarcus Covington. Maybe it's just a whole bunch of things. But if Covington doesn't come back next year, I have two defensive coordinators I would like to see in the Patriots polo. Let's talk about Patrick Graham, shall we? Patrick Graham is currently the defensive coordinator of the Las Vegas Raiders. And Allie, the Raiders don't have a great defense. Why hire Patrick Graham? Well, let's talk about it. He knows Josh McDaniels. In fact, they worked together. Josh McDaniels, which we know as the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots a few years ago, more recently became the head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders. Well, he hired Patrick Graham to be the DC for the Raiders. So he has got a little bit of Patriots connection in there. Not to mention, he worked with New England as a linebackers coach, as a graduate assistant, as a defensive coordinator, including when we went to the Super Bowl and won it against the Seattle Seahawks in 2015. He knows the ins and the outs, albeit it's been a couple of years, about 10, but I could see him possibly ending up with a new team at the end of this year, just basically because I do think that the Raiders are going to be cleaning house after this season. I don't know if AP is the guy, and that's just my opinion. So if they end up cleaning house, most of the time they just clean house. So I think that if he ends up being fired by the end of the year, well, the Patriots would be stupid not to at least give him a phone call and ask him, hey, you've been in this system before. We're not going to keep DeMarcus Covington if that's what they end up deciding to do. Would you want to come be our defensive coordinator? And then, of course, this man who's been unemployed for half of this season is Robert Saleh. I don't need to go that in-depth with Robert Saleh. I know a lot of you guys are aware of who he is because he more recently was the head coach for the New York Jets before he was fired. But ultimately, there are a lot of rumors out there that maybe had a little Aaron Rodgers to do with that, so you can't hold him to it that much. But he was fired, but he did lead the Jets' best defensive unit. When we talk about Robert Saleh, obviously you think defensive-minded head coach, because that's what he is, kind of like Jerod Mayo. He was also a Super Bowl champion in 2014, so he understands what it takes to win the top trophy in the NFL, which of course is the Super Bowl. So when you look at a defensive coordinator like Robert Saleh, I really don't see any way that you can go wrong here. The only reserve that I do have about Robert Saleh is that I just don't know if he'd want to be a defensive coordinator. It's kind of the same thing with Brian Daboll. If he's going to be fired as a head coach, well, he's probably going to want to be a head coach again, probably not an offensive coordinator. Same thing for Robert Saleh. He already said he will not join a team this year. What about next year if DeMarcus Covington ends up not being with the team? And now keep in mind, this could all be just fluff. Who knows if this is actually going to be necessary if Robert Kraft decides to keep DeMarcus Covington and possibly AVP. But my only thing here is that if you're going to take the chance on Jerod Mayo 5 years ago, and I'm okay with that, maybe it's okay to say that not all three worked out, and you end up firing AVP and DeMarcus Covington. But I have a question here for you guys. Which defensive coordinator would you want next season? Go on ahead, drop it in the comment section down below. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And if you haven't already, go on ahead and hit that sub button for me, because if anything happens with the coaching staff, we'll be here to talk about it on Patriots Today by Chat Sports.